Good afternoon, everyone. Wealth pyramid, visualizing it. Capstones on the pyramid, visualizing it. Bleasy, 1671. Take a look at the fortress wrapping the hilltops. What's there? What's disappeared? Mud flood, massive floods. Parts of history I think they forgot to tell us about. Previous video, here's Frankfurt modern compared to Frankfurt 1628. 1565, earlier base map, Antarctica ice-free, and I see what? Africa with massive lakes in the middle as early as the 1500s. What's going on there? And everybody's talking about the economy and how much inflation's running rampant in our lives. So here's the wealth pyramid. You can decide where you sit inside this. Wealth held by people with more than 1 million, 45.8% of global wealth is held by that top percent of the pyramid. And of course we have the top of the top, the one of the 1%. And somewhere on the bottom, 1.2%, less than $10,000. And somewhere in the middle we will straddle that. And I was thinking about pyramids and I found this video here. They do run tours now where you can take paragliders, head over the pyramids, around them, up the Nile, down the Nile, depending on what length of time you want to go. But check out these capstones, the way they were carved. Polished white limestone would have been on top of this. Not sure of the thickness of that itself. Definitely a few inches with something this large. And a different glimpse for you with gaps. So that kind of throws out it was just square blocks built, doesn't it? So doing the mathematics of a lot of people trying to do calculations to explain even just how many building blocks it would take and how long it would take to do the building blocks and how big that would be and how many people would be involved back in the day. Well, now we have to add a whole different level of complexity. Now we're putting angles in, and you can see at the top, at least that top quarter of the pyramid, every single one of those would have been cut at an angle or poured epoxy, depending on how you like to look at history. But anyway, it only took this many square blocks to build it over this amount of time. That doesn't hold water anymore based on just what we saw right here. Cat's out of the bag due to the new tourism industry. And also I'm moving Patreon only content over to the platform there. Can't really talk about the climate here anymore. The woo-woo to certain extents on how economy, population, and overlapping cycles are what we see with human perception and how government's controlling and trying to control that perception shift. That needs to shift over to Patreon, no longer available here on YouTube. So join me over there. And you'll find content that you won't find on any other platform, exclusively for Patreon. Patreon.com/adapt2030. Tbilisi, and actually drop the T, and it's called Bleasy. This is 1671 here. You notice walls around the hills, fortress style, which we've seen across history. Nearly every single town had that, but most of it's gone in time now. But one thing to notice on the far left there, top of the hills, we do see cathedrals, churches, and also fortresses. And one thing to note with fortresses, you see how it's so cleanly built where the bottom is nearly flat. In today's fortresses, you see a lot where there's mud had rolled up on the sides of the walls, and you could nearly just put a ladder to get to the top. It wasn't like that. So something, either earthquakes or land upheaval or mud or something came rolling over a lot of these fortresses through the past, because those straight walls for defense definitely do not exist in a lot of the images that we see today. I encourage you to look around the planet at fortress walls and you'll see what I mean about it looks like mud or something just rolled up against the walls 3/4 of the way up. Our national debt is a real world problem. Our government spends more in interest payments than it does funding the Pentagon. In 2010, our debt, $13 trillion, gold $1,000 an ounce. 2020, the debt was $23 trillion and gold was $1,500 an ounce. 2023, $33 trillion U.S. debt, and now $2,000 an ounce for gold. Call the proud Americans the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. You're going to get some great in-class service. Also, Patriot Gold Group has a no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. And this is Narikala Fortress in Tbilisi. Rebuilt and constructed after earthquakes, sieges, and it was built, say, 400 AD or so. Some accounts even have it further back at 400 BC, moving forward. But notice that knob or lookout post, a circular one at the 3 o'clock position or so, 2 o'clock position on the right there. No buildings in between. What we can see, church in the back. Hit the time machine button, jump back into the early 1880s, and what do we see? Oh, there's a lot of houses right there coming up to that exact same fortress-like round element on the hill. And you'll see different changes along the fortress walls as well. But what's not present, if you go to the peak within the fortress, are all those extra buildings that are there now or were in the past, but have been replaced, i.e., this is also a rendition supposedly from the 1640s. And you notice everybody's just chilling, hanging out with nothing to do. Look at the complexity of this town. And with the fortress walls intact, what types of buildings and structures are either on tops of the hills, over on the different cliff faces. And what I see is smoke coming out. I'm thinking, is that a factory? In the 1600s, like, wait a second here. Something, even from this drawing, makes me question a little bit about our timelines. And if we move forward, we see that same view, sort of. And if you follow down from where the church is inside the fortress, down where there's now no homes, you'll find that lookout tower, that rounded lookout tower. That is a main feature that has never changed, going back to the 1640s, at least, lithographs and drawings that have brought us to the modern time, the modern era. There still are some older structures, but most of it has been destroyed by fire and rebuilt. That's a main theme that runs through our history as well. Looking down the cliff line, and you can see the fortress off to the left. What do we see? Church after church, cathedrals, large buildings that have been destroyed and then reconstructed. Check out the walls on the left there. Fortress style into something that has been reconstructed after earthquakes, apparently. But the walls you can see are not nearly the size. So I'm wondering what megaliths were or were not there in the reconstructive phase. And if you look at the bottom, is that another unearthed section of time from a previous built on top of era of history? Begs the question. And this is from 1890, overlooking that same direction. I'm trying to continually get that same directional viewpoint. Houses there as well. And then that same circular lookout tower is visible. But that's a stark jump from all those massive buildings, cathedrals, architectural feats into a couple hundred years later, and most of it's gone. We'll talk about massive floods, though. Here's Tbilisi during the late 1800s flood. You can see the water coming through the buildings. And again, these staggeringly large vibratory chambers in the churches across Tbilisi. And if you look far across, you can see that same fortress to the top and the right. The reason I bring up mud and things being covered by mud is this excavation in Sardis, what is now known as Turkey, 1910 and 1914. You know, there are a lot of volcanic eruptions, a lot of earthquakes, but what explains this much deposition? But how much of history across our world would be buried if that truly is just the norm of that much is emitted, that much mud comes down, that much ash falls, and it buries this much of society every single X amount of centuries or decades or millennia. So what's under the rest of it? If this is the norm, as many people claim, don't worry about it, it's just a lot of volcanoes erupting, then what else are we missing in our history? And back in time engineering feats that, wait a second, is that a superhighway or is that a causeway, a walkway? Doesn't seem like anything that we know today in terms of tourist areas in Italy along the coast. It's all disappeared. I wonder why. You think World War II was about destroying most of this? Antiquitech So it would be rebuilt with square buildings and this would disappear. Because I did a video before about Frankfurt and the, what you see, cathedral in the center there, just going across the bridge in the top map. Come up about maybe a few hundred feet and off to the left you get a giant cathedral there. Well, people were saying, I don't recognize Frankfurt. That doesn't make sense. There's canals there and all this. And I said, well, all right. I forgot to put the modern Frankfurt below matched up with the 1628 map, which is interesting from the Blisi maps that are in also the early 1600s. What was it that was so advanced at that time? And you even see a remnant of a bit of a star fort in the top map, probably around the 4 or 5 o'clock position there. But when you look at Frankfurt today, that's all been filled in. It's just a ring road. And even that giant cathedral, obviously that was bombed in the war, and none of that remains. None of this beautiful architecture and clues of our history and different way energy may have been produced, or how the economy functioned, how those people were so wealthy to build so much with such a small population on the planet, supposedly living in squalor in the 1500s, barely able to do anything in the 1600s, yet we have these opulent cities everywhere. You're telling me serfs built all this in the 1300s? It just doesn't make sense. Again, timelines seem to be skewed. So let's stay at 1565. Giacomo Gastaldi. This was based on an earlier source map. You know, this is how it used to work. Sailors and admirals would trade maps of different regions from different times, and hey, we just have this map. It was from a different time. It was from the 1300s. It was from 1000 AD, but here it is. And then they overlay on what the newest and greatest was of their times as well. So there's a couple things that come to mind right away. All the Antarctic ice-free, which Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1800s according to our timelines, but here it is actually ice-free with all the mountain ranges intact. But that's not the interesting part for me. Africa. If this is supposedly in the middle 1500s, look at the mega lakes and the massive lakes inside the center of Africa, and now what is some of the driest place on the planet. So doing a little more research, I was able to find better non-colored renditions of libraries. 3 giant lakes. The Sahara in Ethiopia, and Egito, which is Egypt, and Morocco, Mar Ocho. Libya is even there. But what I see is giant lakes and rivers that were not supposed to exist, but they did. So again, timelines and how quickly massive areas of the planet can turn from a desert into a forest, or a forest into a desert, which is why I say everything is completely up in the air. And do you believe the history that we've been fed? Because as we go into this resetting period again, it's not really a reset. It's the great adjustment. Not a great reset. They're going to readjust to the new vibratory field based on changes in our solar system and how humans are going to perceive reality. But that reality change also needs to be controlled moving forward through the change period. And then once it restabilizes, a new system needs to be on top of that. Because you got to realize we're changing state of vibration right as we go through now with these electromagnetic field changes across our planet, across our solar system. This is going to continue. And I wouldn't even say amplify. It's not really the greatest word to use. Change and the quickness of the change. Because when you talk about exponential, you mean like 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. This is more of electromagnetic field changes. There's how people are perceiving reality now. They seem to be stuck in the old baseline, and the vibratory patterns moved, and they're trying to figure it out. And that's why there's a lot of what you consider mental quirkiness happening across the planet. But see how governments are shifting into this new pattern, coming out with cryptocurrencies, coming out with digital IDs. All these things need to be faster because it won't be as dense. But again, the perception of humanity is going to be at a higher level as well. So this new con game needs to be another level up for the controllers, because we'll see through their illusion. And that's the whole thing. People are seeing through it now. Have you noticed? That's the whole reason that all this, how shall I say it again? Great adjustment is upon us. Adjusting to a new frequency field that they can still maintain and control. But history needs to be controlled for that. So let's just take a moment of Zen to chill in the hammock and be thankful that we have so much information about our past that we would never have had even 50 years ago, unless you worked in libraries and collections. And even then, you wouldn't have had digital cameras to take photos of it. It would have been print film reproductions of. So we're so blessed to be where we sit in technology, to know what we do about the past and understand that it's murky. It's definitely not the way it was. It's for sure not linear. Technology's been hidden, maybe to be revealed again sometime for a purpose. But these changes are here. We're in the midst of them. It's no longer waiting for the change. So you might want to think about storable foods during this time as well. My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, 3-month emergency food supply. Because through history, from the Roman era to today, people that stored food, stocked food, are the ones that are still telling the stories because they survived to tell the story to their families that would pass down those stories to the next generation. That family lineage has passed down. So you might want to think about it in terms like that versus, oh, there might be a blackout. Nope, far deeper. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. Bye for now.